The man holding the gun didn't shout. He didn't need to. "Don't move," he said, his voice low and broken, "or she dies." That single sentence sucked the air out of the executive floor. No alarms rang. No hero rushed forward. PowerPoint screens glowed uselessly behind frozen executives, who moments ago had been arguing about profits and projections. Now their mouths were dry, their hands useless, their authority meaningless. The woman on her knees near the glass wall couldn't stop shaking. She was the CEO's executive assistant. Young, hardworking, and invisible most days. Her life now hung on a finger tightening around cold metal. The CEO stood just a few steps away. A man feared across boardrooms, admired in business magazines. His lips moved, but no sound came out. For the first time in his career, there was no decision he could make that would save him. At the far end of the floor stood someone no one had noticed. Daniel. He wore faded work pants and a plain shirt. In his hands was a mop, dripping slightly onto the polished marble. He had been cleaning quietly, as he always did, careful not to interrupt important people. That was the rule for people like him. Don't be seen, don't be heard. Daniel was a single father. His mornings began with packing, a lunch for a 6-year-old girl who believed her dad was the strongest man in the world. His nights ended with sore hands and silent prayers that the Bills wouldn't win this month. He had learned to stay calm in chaos. His daughter had asthma. Panic had never helped her breathe. Calm had. The man with the gun was an IT contractor, fired that morning, escorted out by security like a criminal. Years of loyalty reduced to a cardboard box and a signature on a form. Something inside him had snapped quietly, dangerously. "I gave this company everything," the man whispered, eyes darting. "They erased me like I was nothing." No one answered him. Fear had glued everyone's tongues. Daniel watched. He didn't step forward, not yet. He noticed details others missed, the gunman's trembling hand, the way his breathing stuttered, the fact that the woman being held wasn't struggling anymore. She had gone still, the way people do when hope starts slipping. The CEO finally spoke. His voice cracked. "We can talk about this." The gunman laughed softly. "You already did. Behind closed doors." Daniel understood that laugh. He had heard it once in the mirror after losing his wife and being told to move on by people who had never lost anything. Security updates crackled faintly through someone's phone. Police were minutes away. Minutes were too long. The gunman suddenly pressed the weapon closer. The assistant whimpered. Daniel stepped forward. Not fast, not dramatic. Just one step. Every head snapped toward him. The CEO's eyes widened in horror. Someone shook their head, silently begging him to stop. The gunman turned, startled. "I said don't move!" Daniel stopped instantly. He raised his hands, mop still dangling from his fingers. "You're right," Daniel said calmly. "I won't." His voice wasn't loud. It wasn't commanding. It was steady, human. "I'm just the cleaner," Daniel continued. "I don't matter here." The gunman frowned, confused. "Then go back." Daniel nodded slightly. "I will. I just wanted to say something first." Silence stretched. The gunman hesitated. No one had spoken to him like a person since morning. Daniel's eyes stayed on the man, not the gun. "You're not a bad man," he said quietly. "Bad men don't look this scared." The assistant let out a shaky breath. The CEO wanted to scream at Daniel to shut up. He didn't. Something about the janitor's calm unsettled him. "You don't know me," the gunman snapped. "I don't," Daniel agreed. "But I know what it feels like when everything you built disappears in one day." That landed. The gunman's jaw tightened. "They took my job." Daniel nodded. "My wife died in a hospital hallway while I was filling out paperwork." The room went still again, but this time, not with fear. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't dramatize it. He simply spoke the truth. "For a while," Daniel continued, "I thought if I stayed angry, it would mean she mattered. Turns out anger just made my daughter lose her dad, too." The gunman's breathing slowed, just slightly. The CEO stared. He didn't know this man's name. He didn't know anything about the people who cleaned his office every night. And suddenly, that ignorance felt dangerous. Daniel took another careful step. No one stopped him. "I'm not asking you to trust them," Daniel said. "I'm asking you to trust yourself enough to stop." The gunman's hand shook harder now. Tears welled up, uninvited and humiliating. They betrayed me, he whispered. Daniel nodded again. So don't let betrayal turn you into something you can't. Explain to yourself tomorrow. The assistant sobbed quietly. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. The gunman looked around. Executives avoided his eyes. Only Daniel stood there, open, unafraid. Why are you doing this? The gunman asked. Daniel swallowed. For the first time, his voice trembled. Because my daughter needs her father to come home tonight. And that woman needs to go home too. The gunman's finger loosened, just a fraction. The CEO felt something unfamiliar rise in his chest. Shame. Daniel took one final step forward. I won't move anymore, he said softly. But you can. And for the first time since the words, or she dies, were spoken, hope entered the room. The gunman's hand trembled, then slowly lowered. The sound it made when it hit the floor was small, almost embarrassing, considering how much terror it had carried moments before. The executive assistant collapsed forward, crying into the carpet. Someone rushed to her, but Daniel didn't move. He stayed where he was, hands still raised, eyes still on the man who had just stepped back from the edge. The police arrived seconds later. Shouts, commands, cuffs. The danger was over. But the silence Daniel had created lingered longer than the sirens. As the gunman was led away, he turned his head once. He didn't look at the CEO. He looked at Daniel. Thank you, he whispered, barely audible. Daniel nodded. Nothing more. The CEO sank into a chair as if his body had finally remembered gravity. His hands shook. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals without flinching. But this had stripped him raw. And the person who had saved his company, his assistant, and possibly his own life wasn't a senior executive or security chief. It was the janitor. In the days that followed, the building returned to normal on the surface. Meetings resumed. Emails flowed. Profits mattered again. But something inside the CEO refused to reset. He reviewed the termination that had triggered the crisis. The contractor's dismissal had followed protocol, cold, efficient, legal. Yet buried deep in the documents was a recommendation he had never read, a warning about the man's mental state, a request for a transition plan, ignored to save time. Then he looked deeper. The assistant Daniel had saved? Overworked? Underpaid? Repeated requests for support denied. And Daniel, 6 years of employment, perfect attendance, no complaints, no recognition. His wages had been frozen during a cost optimization phase that had padded executive bonuses, including the CEO's own. The realization burned. He had built a system that rewarded silence and punished humanity. And when it finally broke, the only person who held it together was the one person it had taught to endure quietly. The CEO asked for Daniel by name. When Daniel was summoned to the executive office, he thought he was being fired. He wore his cleanest shirt and rehearsed explanations in his head, wondering how he'd tell his daughter they might need to move again. The CEO didn't sit behind his desk. He stood. I owe you my life, he said. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. I was just talking. No, the CEO replied. You were listening. That's something I stopped doing a long time ago. Daniel said nothing. The CEO continued, voice lower now. I watched everyone freeze, including myself. You moved when it mattered. Daniel finally spoke. I didn't move. I stayed calm. That sentence hit harder than any accusation. The CEO offered Daniel money. A lot of it. Daniel shook his head. I don't want blood money. The CEO winced. Then what do you want? Daniel thought of his daughter waiting for him every evening, asking if he was okay. He thought of the man who had almost destroyed his life because no one had helped him leave with dignity. I want people here to matter before they break, Daniel said. The CEO listened. Within weeks, things began to change. Quietly at first. Counseling access during layoffs, human reviews instead of automated emails. The assistant Daniel had saved was promoted and given. Authority she'd earned years ago. The contractor received treatment, not just punishment. And Daniel? He refused a corner office. He accepted a role no one expected. Employee care liaison. A bridge between the invisible and the powerful. He kept his mop in his locker. He said it reminded him who he was. The CEO watched him often from a distance. One evening, long after most employees had left, the CEO saw Daniel sitting alone in the lobby, video calling his daughter. She was laughing, holding up a drawing of the two of them. The CEO felt something tighten in his chest. All his success had never earned him that look. That night, the CEO wrote a message to the entire company. He didn't mention the gun. He didn't dramatize the danger. He wrote about calm, about listening, about how a system that ignores pain eventually creates it. He ended with a sentence that unsettled everyone who read it. The strongest person in this building doesn't sit in the boardroom. Daniel never became famous. He never told the story himself. Most new employees didn't even know what he had done, but people felt the difference. They were heard sooner, treated better, stopped before they broke. And every morning, when Daniel walked his daughter to school, she held his hand tightly. "Daddy," she once said, "you're brave even when you don't shout." Daniel smiled, because true heroes rarely raise their voices. They stay calm when everything else falls apart.